On this episode of The Mothman and the Bible Belt, actress and singer-songwriter Ann Magnuson dishes on her West Virginia upbringing and her latest single, Ghost Cat. Magnuson discusses in depth her storied life on stage and in film, landing the television series Anything But Love, and whether or not Bongwater will ever reform to record new music. Magnuson chats about befriending a young Madonna, losing friends in the entertainment industry, as well as her brother to AIDS, and Bongwater's iconic performance on sax legend David Sanborn's night music show. Coming up next.
Welcome to the Mothman in the Bible Belt podcast with your host, Buck Fantastic.
Ghost Cat cookies.
Ann Magnuson got her start in acting, performing in Kanawha Players and Charleston Light Opera Guild productions during the 1960s. After graduating from George Washington High School in Charleston, West Virginia, Magnuson attended Denison University, where she obtained her BFA in theater and cinema. After studying abroad in London, Ann found herself in New York City, where her career as an entertainer took off. Some of Ann Magnuson's movie credits include Making Mr. Right, A Night in the Life of Jimmy Reardon, Tequila Sunrise, Clear and Present Danger, Small Soldiers, Cabin Boy, The Hunger, and Desperately Seeking Susan. Magnuson has recorded 6 records with Bongwater and 4 solo releases. In 2018, Magnuson was inducted into the West Virginia Music Hall of Fame. Join me, your host, Buck Fantastic, for another exciting episode of Mothman in the Bible Belt. It's eclectic chit-chat of otherworldly origins. And welcome to the Mothman in the Bible Belt. How are you doing?
I'm doing okay. It's a pleasure to be back in the Bible Belt, even if it's just through my voice.
You grew up in my home city of Charleston, West Virginia. Do you have
Where did you grow up? What part?
Kanawha City?
Oh, yeah. It's very lovely there. I'm from South Hills.
I was just up there 2 weeks ago.
For a long time, I've had a fantasy of having a place there, preferably the place I grew up, but I don't think they're going to let go of that house. But I don't know. It's as I get older, maybe it's just a fantasy, but you never know.
Lots of people love coming back to the state to retire.
Yeah, I haven't ruled it out by any means, and I am coming back in June, and my husband will be joining me for my 50th high school reunion.
Whoa.
Yes, I hope I don't regret it, but it should be interesting. One should do 50. If you reach 50, high school reunion or any reunion, you should probably do it and whatever, see what the deal is, see what happens. And I love coming back there. It's so beautiful. I'm not real pleased about the political situation, but
neither am I.
The trees and the plants and the flowers and the animals, they don't care, and the sun don't care, as one of my songs states. But I do like to come back, and I've maintained a lot of friendships with folks there, and I find people, for the most part, to be extremely genuine and real, and I don't get too much of a sense of the Fox News aggression unless you go looking for it. Or Stern Wheel Regatta, you'll see it in big flags on the back of boats on the Kanawha River.
Do you have a whole lot of fond memories growing up here?
I do, yeah, it's very fond. In fact, I probably romanticized it a bit too much, but I think it was a really nice place to grow up at that particular time. I liked being in nature. My brother and I were both always going on hikes, and that was in the 60s, where they would let you go. The kids could leave the house and say, "I'll be back later," and hours would pass, and your parents didn't know where the hell you were. And then we come back and all was fine. But I, of course, would not recommend that these days. And maybe we were just lucky back then. But it was a real pleasure to be able to. And a lot of times we just stayed in our own little area where all the families looked out for each other. And we just take our hikes down into the woods, down down in the holler and walk around the creek and come back. Maybe go out with get berries, when blackberries were in season, and all our dogs would come with us. It was a very idyllic time. Of course, but then we were watching Vietnam on television, the civil rights, the violence in the South, and people marching for their rights, which they needed to do, and that all seemed a bit distant from our little spot in the Canal Valley, but it was very real and very present. So we weren't completely isolated from what was going on in the rest of the world.
You were involved in the anti-Vietnam War movement, weren't you?
Well, my first march I ever went to, I was 15, and I went with my friend Tina Lowe, and we joined a group that were marching on the Federal Building. And I remember one of the older hippie guys, shimmied up the flagpole and pulled the American flag down, which my father would not have approved of that at all. But it's kind of like the same now. Humanity's crazy, and doing all sorts of violent, crazy things. And we need to evolve and try to stop doing that stuff, but it's going to take a long time.
Yeah, I did some digging and I found that your acting career goes back to 1966 with the Kanawha Player Club's production of Cat on the Hot Tin Roof. What do you remember about that?
Yeah. Oh, I remember having a blast. My mother was involved with the community theater. The first production I actually was ever in was 1964 with the Charleston Light Opera Guild in The Music Man. So I had a lot of fun doing that stuff. To me, it was just another activity, like horseback riding or ballet classes. I remember very specifically, we had to shoot cap guns at the actor playing Brick, who had fallen. I guess he was on crutches and he'd fallen, and then these obnoxious kids come in and start shooting their cap guns. And it was so much fun to be given the license to be an obnoxious kid and just laugh. And I learned really early on, how you wait for your cue, you go on, you do the thing, and then you leave the stage. I took to it pretty naturally, and then ended up being in a lot of community theater productions and productions in high school.
Yeah, I saw you were in Hello Dolly, also with the Charleston Light Opera Guild and the Miracle Worker, and
Oh yeah, that was my big breakout role as Helen Keller, and that pretty much set the pace for me to recreate Helen Keller more or less in performance art and bands and things where you could just be as free and wild as you wanted to be and let your imagination go completely bonkers, which I was allowed to do in clubs and nightclubs and art spaces and various other spaces in New York City back in the 80s.
You got a new single and video out for Ghost Cat with West Virginia folk critters Mothman and the Flatwoods Monster featured in it. What inspired you to write it?
Well, what really inspired me was I had heard of some people in the LA punk scene having seen a ghost cat. And actually, I remembered who that was when I read Kid Congo Power's memoir, which is a wonderful memoir, and he even talks about this ghost cat. But a few other people claimed they saw it. And of course, I thought, I want to see a ghost cat. And it just stuck in my head ever since the mid 80s when I first heard that story. And I thought, I don't know, something just at one point I just started singing this song about a ghost cat. And I'd sing it around the house, and then I decided, you know what, we got to record this. And I called up Michael Lipton from the West Virginia Music Hall of Fame, and I'd played with him on many occasions before. And he rounded up the band, and I sang it into a voice memo, and he, set up an arrangement, and the band recorded it in Charleston with Don Dixon, who came down from Canton, Ohio. Don comes into Charleston a lot to record people. And then I put the final vocals on in Los Angeles. And then I asked Michael, oh gosh, do you think Charlie McCoy would put on some harmonica for us? And Michael asked him, and he did. And I'd met Charlie when I was inducted in the West Virginia Music Hall of Fame in 2018. And he was really gracious and encouraging and so nice. And so it's a dream come true that Charlie McCoy, who's an absolute legend in Nashville and all over the world, played with Elvis Presley, probably Elvis Costello too, but Elvis Presley, Bob Dylan, every country artist you can think of, and he's legendary. And he just put some kick-ass, beautiful harmonica on it. And then I just self released it, on Bandcamp, and my friend Adam Dugas and I made this video for it. We had made videos before out here in LA, and it was really a blast to do. It was very DIY, grassroots, kind of hillbilly country folk song. Simple, but I was able to also give a nod to those West Virginia monsters who I'd grown up with, Mothman, and particularly Flatwoods Monster, who I always wanted to see whenever we drove up from Charleston to Morgantown to visit my grandmother who lived up there. We'd pass Flatwoods and I'd always take a look. And that thought ended up in a Bongwater lyric in a song called No Trespassing. Every time we passed Flatwoods, I'd take a look, hoping to see it, hoping to believe. We all want to see a UFO, right? You'd think I would have seen one growing up in West Virginia, and I'm out here in Joshua Tree now, but no dice, not yet.
In Bongwater, you also wrote a song about West Virginia's famous mystery hole.
Yes, yes, and most of those Bongwater songs, not all, but a lot of them started off as poems. I started to write poetry in earnest after discovering Patti Smith, and I also took some poetry classes in London, where I was for my junior year abroad during college, and studied with a poet named Hugo Williams, who is rather well known there. I just wrote tons of poems and things that I thought, well, these could be lyric, and that particular one was set to music and ended up on a Bongwater song. And I've played that a lot in West Virginia because whenever I come back, and I like to play the songs, perform the songs that are specifically about West Virginia. And there are a lot of them. I remember writing most of the Bongwater lyrics and the material on our porch on Sweetbriar Road up there in South Hills.
What music were you listening to growing up?
Oh, well, the Teddy Bears Picnic was the first record. My mother had, my parents really liked big band music, and they didn't have a whole lot of records. There were some classical records, but also there were Broadway cast albums. So we had My Fair Lady and The Music Man, of course. They had a record of music from this movie Around the World in 80 Days on one side, and the other side was American in Paris, the film music. It wasn't actually from the film. It was some kind of a generic symphony redoing it for those records that they would put out back then. There was a lot of Mitch Miller during the Christmas season that my dad would sing along to. I really started to buy records more when I became a teenager. So Santana, Oye Como Va. Before that, my babysitter turned me on to Motown and Paul Revere and the Raiders. So I was really into that stuff and got the Monkees. I liked the Monkees. I was watching a lot of bands on the variety shows like Ed Sullivan, and the 60s and the 70s, particularly the 60s, were just chock full of variety shows, which was an extension of vaudeville. And I learned so much by watching television and being exposed to all these different kinds of acts, because it wasn't like today where there's so many different avenues and channels that you end up being stuck in a rut of what you like and only that for the most part. And the algorithms encourage people to stay stuck in a rut. Like, if you like this, you'll like this. But it's like, well, but that's almost the same thing. Why not something completely and utterly different? And you were exposed to that by only having 3 channels on television, and also having friends who would turn you on to the latest band that was coming out of London or New York or Nashville or wherever it was.
For 2016's Dream Girl, you covered Heart's Dreamboat Annie. Are you a huge Heart fan?
I love Heart, but I didn't really have their records. But how can you not love Barracuda and a variety of other songs? And then once you exposed to that video of Nancy Wilson playing the guitar, it's, you know, you're just hooked. They're ultimate rock goddesses. And Wilson's voice is incredible. I love folk voices that are full on belters as well. When I was in fourth grade, our teacher we used to have I don't know how the curriculum is now, and I'm scared thinking that maybe they don't have any of the arts in elementary schools. But we had an art day, we had the music time, and in fourth grade, we were our teacher played a lot of Peter, Paul, and Mary. So we sang along to Puff the Magic Dragon and Where Have All the Flowers Gone? So you're exposed to all these protest songs, which they probably wouldn't allow today. But also, Peter, Paul, and Mary's harmonies are just spectacular, and the melodies of the songs they chose to record are incredible. And Mary's voice, that exposure to that kind of sound is something I drew on when we were recording some of the Bongwater songs. But what was fun about Bongwater and all the bands I've been in is that I don't stick to one style. I like to mix it up as if one were watching, changing the channels on multiple variety shows, seeing a variety of genres and approaches, and that's exciting to me. I also loved Carly Simon and Carole King. Those were important female voices. My friend Jackson Morton turned me on to Joni Mitchell. And then I got completely hooked onto Elton John because I played the piano, not well, but I took piano lessons, and I loved his music, probably because the early stuff is so gospel influenced, and they had their country section, like when they were doing Tumbleweed Connection and Mad Men Across the Water. That stuff was so perfect for a baby glam rock hillbilly hippie in West Virginia. Actually, glam rock hadn't even come into the picture yet. It was very homespun, back to the land. There were hippies coming in to live on communes in West Virginia. And
Did you ever get to meet any of your musical heroes?
well, I met David Bowie, who I did this film called The Hunger, where I played his first victim. And after Elton John, once I discovered Bowie, I got more into him. Well, I really got into Bowie through Hunky Dory, which was a much more piano-based album and much more kind of folk rock. But then as I grew older and things got heavier with the electric guitars, I got more into that sound. So it was an absolute thrill and very surreal to meet David Bowie and then work with him in a film and make out with him take after take, which was required of me as an actress. So that was very exciting. And one day I hope to write about all that in a memoir.
You did a tribute show to David Bowie in Charleston, was it 10, 15 years ago for Covenant House?
Yes. The Covenant House, I talked to Brooke Brown about doing a benefit, and I thought, well, the easiest thing for me to do, and I think the thing that's the most appealing to a wider group of people there would be a collection of David Bowie songs, because I know them. They're fun. They're great songs. And I said, we have to involve Chuck Beal, who is a local musician who I went to high school with and dated briefly. And he and I were, back when we were teenagers, were rabid Bowie fans. He was a huge Bowie fan. So it just made sense. Let's see if Chuck will do it. And he wanted to, and he assembled the band, and he did a fantastic job with the musical direction as the band leader. And we performed at the Empty Glass, and it was great fun. And we got to raise some money for Covenant House. And I had done the Covenant House benefit several in the past. One of them was reprising a one-woman show I did. It was very much about Charleston, called You Could Be Home Now, and I did that at the Capitol Theater in 1994, who had packed house. The governor was there, Gaston Caperton. He had a special dinner afterwards. They raised a lot of money, and it was the most appreciative audience I have ever performed in front of, because they got it. They understood everything I was talking about in terms of home, a feeling of yearning, a sense of loss, but also a love for the eccentricities of West Virginia. Something that was rather lost on some of the New York audience. But
I want to talk about your 1995 record, The Love Show. I bought it at the West Virginia Book Festival a few years back. I like it. So seriously, who called you Miss Pussy Pants?
oh, a boyfriend. And he just said it once in kind of this kooky jest. And I thought, that's hilarious. That had to be a song. And at the time, it was LA around 92. And I was doing some recording and playing live with the artist Mike Kelly, who had a band that he called Super Session, and they would have guest singers. And the singer before me was the artist Raymond Pettibone, and they asked me to sing. So I would go in the studio, we'd make up songs, and then I ended up using some of those songs on the Love Show. That song, Miss Pussy Pants, came about because we were about to finish this session, and I thought, oh, let's just do one more, which kind of a Janis Joplin, Hazel Adkins, drunken bar singer that I envisioned was in some roadhouse like in central West Virginia that's off the beaten track and just having a good old time, drinking too much moonshine and whoosh, all that stuff. And we did it all in one take. Actually, I have the original demo, which is much slower and much more swampy sounding and real just really so bizarre. The song, the version on the record is much more. It's much faster, but yeah, it's pretty silly. It's real silly. But if you're from West Virginia and you've been in one of those bars and you had a little too much to drink and everybody's and getting, we used to call it getting red. We're gonna get red, like being a redneck. It's not that unusual. It's not. It's no big deal. It's no big deal.
I think it's
Oh,
absolutely hilarious. I love it.
well, you would because you're from West Virginia.
I was speaking with Charleston musician Kevin Kidd about your career, and he spoke about seeing you on recently departed sax legend David Sanborn's night music show with Screaming Jay Hawkins and the Pussy Willows and being in awe. Bongwater was doing Rocky Erickson's You Don't Love Me Yet.
Yeah.
What was that experience like doing that show?
Well,
You getting to play with that legend. I mean, Screaming Jay Hawkins. Wow.
I know. I have a great Polaroid of us together that he signed. I've got to find that. Well, it was very strange because most of our activity is Bongwater, and it was pretty early on in the inception of the band. The producer, Hal Wilner, who was very plugged in with both the uptown world and then the underground alternative music scene, he's the one who invited us to do that. I have to say it was quite strange going to, I think it was the Rockefeller Center. It was uptown, going into this fancy building, going up this elevator and going through these corridors to a real professional TV studio when I'd only been doing that Bongwater material at CBGB or these like hole in the wall, nothing clubs, real gummy kind of just dirty back alley kind of places. So to go from that to uptown Rockefeller Center, which I'm pretty sure that's where the studio was, I suddenly thought, oh my God, this is, uh-oh. I was scared. I was just nervous that like, this is bizarre. I'm very happy that my friend Pilar Lemosner, who sadly passed away last year, she did costumes for me for many of my performances. She was with me, and she was the one who dressed me up in all that finery that I'm wearing. And having her there as an anchor was really, really great. And the Pussy Willows and the band, I mean, everybody, there was camaraderie there, so that made me feel a little bit at ease. But I'll tell you, it was like an opening night, but all the experience I had as a kid and doing community theater and in college, majoring in theater and film and all the other things, the plays I had done and all the other little indie movies and things kicked in, and you just, okay, I'm not gonna let this fear ruin this performance. I know how to I know the song, I'm gonna do it. So boom, you do it.
And it's great. I've been watching it on YouTube past few weeks, and I downloaded that song, and I really like it. It's
Oh,
a really
that's great to hear. Well, David Sanborn recently passed away, so rest in peace, David. We didn't get to know him at all, really.
How did you and Mark Kramer meet?
He was doing sound at a band I was in called Pulsalama.
When did y'all decide y'all wanted to form a
He
band of your own?
he contacted me about, I think Eugene Chadbourne had quit Shockabilly, and, I don't know, I don't really know, all I know is he contacted me and wanted to see if I'd be in, do some collaboration. I'd quit Pulsalama, and then it kind of died out about a year after, right? Me and Danny Johnson and Andy Weiland, we all started the band initially. But there was so much infighting and it was not pleasant. So I was like, I'm out of here. And then, yeah, I got this call and I thought, well, that sounds like fun. I was doing other bands too. I had a folk band with Christian Hoffman, who I met early on. He was a really good friend with Lance Loud, and Christian did the music for Klaus Nomi. So I wanted to have a folk band because I also at the same time had a heavy metal band named Vulcan Death Grip. So I thought, well, if I'm going to have a heavy metal band on one end of the spectrum, I want to have a folk band on the other end of the spectrum because I don't want to be stuck in one genre. And then this Bongwater, this other opportunity came up, and I had already had the name Bongwater kind of written down as a potential band. So I said, oh, let's name it Bongwater.
Y'all
And then-
released 6 records. Are you and Mark gonna ever? Is there potential for a reunion to do a 7th record, or is that
No.
over?
That's over. But I will say that I've recorded new material with Vulcan Death Grip. So that material is going to come out
Wow.
maybe in the fall or the winter. I'm not sure. We're still finishing them up. 3 new songs so far, and then a whole bunch that were never released and then other stuff that hasn't been recorded yet that are great, fun songs. I contacted them a couple of years ago and I said, we should really do something and, come full circle with this project and put out some recordings. And it's fun. The stuff is really, really completely wild. It's really fun.
Bongwater played Wigstock back in the day. Are you the only West Virginia act, both musical and or drag, to ever play Wigstock?
Did we play? I don't think Bongwater played Wigstock. I played Wigstock separately. I don't
heard you
remember
talk about
Bong-
it. I heard it was you or Lady Bunny was talking about playing on a podcast that you or Bongwater, I wasn't sure. I thought it was Bongwater, but I guess it was just you who did Wigstock back in the day.
Yeah, I did one. Yeah, I remember seeing the first few Wigstocks when they were in Tompkins Square Park. And those were great. I mean, and Lady Bunny was always just hilarious and on it and always had great jokes and quips. And ever since I met her at the Pyramid Club, and there's a new book on the Pyramid that was just released. I was back in New York performing for the book launch at the original location, which was wild. Talk about full circle. And this whole concept of alternative drag was born in particular at the Pyramid, and then moved further into the mainstream consciousness through Lady Bunny and Wigstock and RuPaul.
Did you ever get to see Lady Bunny when she was in that band with DJ Dimitri?
Yeah, I remember I saw Dimitri and Lady Keir all the time. I probably saw them, I probably went into the Pyramid at one point and saw there was something going on stage and it was probably them. I would pop in and see lots of stuff and not even know, I mean, I knew the people, but I wouldn't know exactly what manifestation of a creative performance was happening because people were always in other people's shows or in their bands or in their concepts and things were different every night. It's a little hard to pinpoint certain details, but that's why it's good some of these books are out there.
I saw a video of Lady Bunny and DJ Dimitri doing Fancy. It was before Reba covered it, but I thought Lady Bunny and DJ Dimitri's version was a lot better. It was a live version, but
Oh, I'm sure it was genius.
Yeah.
I'll have to go look for it. Is it on YouTube?
Uh-huh.
Yeah, there was so much stuff that wasn't documented that was brilliant because it was all very spontaneous. it was done in the spirit of, I don't know, there was a period where there was no chance of having any of this on the mainstream television shows. So it actually gave you more freedom to be more extreme. And I saw so much. It was back in the late 70s, 80s, and into the 90s. That was brilliant, brilliant, brilliant. And it's never been documented. It only exists in memory. But that's why I always do a better show if I know there's no documentation. Always.
Someone posted on YouTube a supposed voicemail message from Klaus Nomi to you shortly before he passed. Is that legit?
Yes, it is. Yeah. I had that on my I had a cassette of saved voice messages, and Kramer liked to put voice messages on those early records. So I said, well, here's some. I never got that cassette back, but I'm glad it exists out there.
Yeah, I wasn't
Yes, I
sure if it
called.
was real or what.
Well, I called Klaus. Well, nobody knew that was Klaus for a long, long time. And I guess now with the internet, all bets are off. But I had heard that he was quite sick. And I knew him from before the vaudeville show happened. Met him at Max's Kansas City in early 78. And that's where I saw him perform on a dirty snow mound, some operas that I talk about in the Nomi song, which is a movie about him. But then the filmmaker wanted me to connect it to the vaudeville show. And he said, well, connect that story with the vaudeville show. And I didn't realize that, oh, no, the dirty snow mound story was about February 78, February, March. The vaudeville show happened that next fall. So I did not knowingly connect those two. I only did it because the filmmaker wanted that kind of shortcut for his editing, to make it easier for him. But
Plus,
that's something something that's been misconstrued as something I said purposely, and I did not. So I just wanted to set the record straight.
he was like the first big name in New York City in the entertainment industry to pass away from AIDS, wasn't he?
Well, Klaus's his name wasn't as big as many other people in the Broadway world, who I think passed away from AIDS around that time. But see, there wasn't a name for it. There was a very well-known journalist named Henry Post who came to Club 57. He died. He was the first person I knew who died in 1982 of something they called gay cancer. They didn't even have a name for it. And just suddenly I was told, oh, Henry Post died. Like, what? Because he and I just got along so well, and I was so upset. And then Klaus was the next. And then it started to become more, that was, I think, 83. But see, I just I think I heard from Joey, like, oh, Klaus is really, really sick. And I called him to say, can you, heard you're really sick. Do you want me to come over? We live just around the corner from each other. Do you need anything? Do you want me to come over and help? Whatever. And so then he called me back and left that voice message.
How did AIDS? I know that it was more pronounced in New York City than it was in Charleston, but like, how would you like?
Well, I'll try to give you the short version. It was devastating. It destroyed our lives. All of us who have survived have severe PTSD. My brother died of AIDS in 1998. My best friend from Charleston, one of my best high school friends, Jackson Morton, died of AIDS in 1997. There were some dancers from my high school there's a dancer who I was in some shows with. He and his wife died of AIDS because they were dancers on cruise ships, I think, and there was some other people. There were people everywhere, but it was more pronounced in New York City because there were more people there. And it was an absolute plague. It was a war, and a war that Ronald Reagan wouldn't even acknowledge. I think my brother could have lived, and many other people could have lived, had there been more leadership from Reagan, from the country. If they had put as much time into finding out what AIDS was and how to fight it and how to treat it, as they did with COVID, many, many people would still be alive who died very young. And Keith Haring died at 31. Around the late 80s and into the early 90s, it just became a tsunami of death. And it was just death, 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 memorials, benefits. It was horrible.
Was
Absolutely
your
horrible.
was your brother fortunate enough to get on that cocktail before he
No,
passed?
no, he just missed it.
That's sad.
It was horrible. I can't even. It was such a horror, an absolute horror that it scarred me for life. But maybe because of where I grew up, and you learn to soldier on and move forward and keep their memory alive. And there were so many ACT UP marches I was in, so much activism going on. I was in so many benefits to raise money for people for their medical costs. And it was a very, very dark time.
That record that you did with Christian Hoffman in 2006, Pretty Songs and Ugly Stories, I think it's your best record. What do you think?
Oh, that's so nice for you to say. It's beautifully arranged and constructed, thanks to Christian. Christian, his forte is beautifully crafted pop music, and that's what we wanted to create. And I'm really happy that you feel that way. I was gonna make it more. Initially, I thought it would be something different, but Christian, as the producer, came in and just literal took the word pretty literally and brought in strings. I mean, it's very, very lush, and it's very deep. It has a lot of deep messages embedded in those lyrics that I wrote, and he helped with some of them, but maybe some of them are a little too obscured for some people. But if you know the emotions, you have personal experience of a lot of the emotions that those lyrics convey, you're going to get it.
What can you say about you and Joey Arias's The Andy and Edie Show?
Well, I'll say this about Joey and I. We make each other laugh. We have a fantastic friendship. We clicked immediately. I used to run into him at clubs and we would just make up these characters just on the cuff, just sitting around or standing in line or and he's brilliant at improvising. And we created these characters, and I had the idea. It's a lot. We had actually no. He had a band named Strange Party, and there's a video online called The Imitators, and we played Andy and Edie in that for the first time, and then decided to do it as a extended show at Danceteria and other clubs. And I wanted to do it as if Andy and Edie had a TV variety show like Sonny and Cher, and people loved it. It was so much fun. But we ended up doing all these other characters. There was Gloria and Murray, who were Hollywood agents who produced a musical about the Manson family, and then he played Charlie Manson, and I was Squeaky Fromme. And we were very influenced by John Waters. So, if something was tasteless, nobody put brakes on anything in terms of taste. In fact, the more tasteless, the better. Thank you, John Waters. So we had that. We had we just had a lot of characters, and some of them have never been documented. There was a little quick video of us as we were playing these fashion victims from London, Trevor and Fiona. This was sort of at the height of the new romantic period, or where Londoners were really decked out to the gills, kind of at the beginning of Boy George's reign as queen of that scene. So we had the fashion victims. We just were always improvising, cutting each other up, laughing, and laughter is the the word, joy of life.
I
We just did some of those. We did Andy and Edie. We revised it last year for an event that the Broad Museum wanted me to do, resurrect the spirit of Club 57 in some shows that we did at a club here or in LA called Zebulon. So we redid the Andy and Edie show, and just making each other laugh again, and just having a ball, feeling happy to be alive and to know each other and to have these deep friendships that endure everything.
In 1987, you co-wrote and starred in the Cinemax special Vandemonium with Joey and Meatloaf. Was there any
And
talk?
Eric Bogosian is in it, and the music by Mark Shaman, who won a Tony Award for Hairspray, for doing the music for Hairspray.
Was Sweet Pea based on a cabin creature?
Sweet Pea was definitely based on like a West Virginian kind of gal, but not exclusively. I was looking at I like all kinds of different magazines and going into portals of different lifestyles and different kinds of people and how people choose identities and how they choose to live their life, or it's usually chosen for you. But I got obsessed with these biker chicks that were in a magazine called Easy Riders. There was a magazine stand on St. Mark's Place and 2nd Avenue called Gem Spa, and it's famously depicted on the back of the New York Dolls debut album. And that was the center of the universe in the East Village. It's no longer there, but it had every magazine known to man. So you would look at all these magazines and just like, what's that? That's pretty crazy. Easy Riders, a magazine about bikers. So I got kind of obsessed with this character of a biker chick, and that became one of my characters that I did at the Pyramid Club. I did all those characters in clubs first. And then when Cinemax gave me this opportunity to do what they called the Cinemax Comedy Experiment, I incorporated those characters, and with this script written with my friend William Fleet Lively, who also passed away from AIDS. And then we had additional material from Frank Holiday, who is an artist who's still living and creating beautiful paintings in New York City. You should check him out. And because it was called a comedy experiment, I figured, well, it's an experiment. We're going to just do anything we want, the way I've done it in nightclubs the last several years. And we did. And we had a blast, but I got eviscerated by the mainstream critics. But I will tell you, years later, I ended up doing a story on it for an audiobook for David Sedaris, Holidays on Ice. And he asked me for out to lunch when I was in New York, and he with him and Amy. So Amy and David Sedaris and I sat and had lunch, and they told me they watched Vandemonium when they were still in North Carolina and loved it, and we just went on and on and on about how much they loved it. And I felt so happy, like so vindicated. It's like, fuck those critics. If Amy and David Sedaris loved this and it has in any way encouraged them to be as wacky, my work is done.
Is that how you landed the book of Liz?
No, that was completely separate. That was a film, very small theater, 99 cent. It was, that was about basically the budget. 99-seat theater in Hollywood, and a friend, they were producing it. The Blank Theater were producing it, and the Daniel Henning, who runs that theater, was talking to a friend of mine, and she recommended me or called me and said, "Hey, they're doing this Book of Liz. Would you be interested?" And I said, "Yes." So that's how I got into that, and that was one of the best parts I've ever been given to play.
In 1989, you landed a retooled Anything But Love. Your character, Catherine Hughes, replaced Norman Kill. Were things on shaky ground for season 2 with all the shakeups with cast, or
With all the what?
with all the shakeup in the cast? There's a few cast members.
No, we got along great. They brought in a new showrunner. He was the one who brought me in, Peter Noah. But we all got along great and had a lot of fun. I always said if they shot the rehearsals, it would be a #1 show because of the amount of laughing and ad-libbing. Richard Lewis was so funny. And I'm so happy he and I reconnected last year and we're in touch quite a bit. So it was very, very hard to hear about his passing. But everybody, I think, got along great. And Richard Frank played my assistant. He also got AIDS and passed away. So AIDS was not, it was in my life from the early 80s on. And Richard was Juilliard trained and so funny and so smart. Joe Mahar was a British, or he was Canadian actor, British, um, did a lot of theater in London. Just everyone was smart and hilarious and a joy to work with. So, these TV shows, particularly at that time, there's so many executives in the mix deciding what's funny or what's not funny, and they keep changing things constantly and constantly. And there were many times where I thought, if they just shot what we just rehearsed with the script as it all works. Let's do it. We can all go home, but no, we had to keep, and it's just sort of, I don't know. I think it's always the race to get more ratings and to get a higher, get in the top 5 or whatever, instead of just letting the show be what it is, and then it will succeed on its own merits. But anyway, it was a wonderful, wonderful experience for me, and it was a great break. And I was always very, very grateful to have been on that show. I got a lot of crap from like the more underground or New York people, not, I mean, more of the East Village performance art world. They thought I was selling out or something. And it's like, don't be ridiculous. I'm supporting my mother. I've got a boyfriend who doesn't want to pay the bills. Somebody's got to be responsible around here. I want a job. I want to get a real paycheck. Be a responsible citizen. Fuck all of you.
When the show got canceled, did everyone go into panic mode?
No, I was kind of relieved because I wasn't then given much to do and I wanted to expand my horizons. Of course, believe me, if they had kept it going. I mean, if somebody came to me now and said, "We want you to be on a TV show and you work every week and you get paid this," and I'm like, "I'll be there." I'll be there. I know it had upset Richard Lewis a lot, but this is part of being an actor. This is part of being an actor. It's feast or famine. So it's best to learn that early on and don't get highfalutin with your spending. Put it all away for a rainy day. And having grown up the way I did with the parents I had who went through the Depression, my father was very frugal. I hardly got any allowance at all. So I learned real early on I had to make my own way. I had to save, be thrifty, which was okay in terms of clothing because I only liked the clothes in thrift stores. So that part was good. When I was in junior high school, I made all my clothes because I was a little small for my age, so I couldn't wear like some of the clothing some of the other girls were wearing. So I've made my own clothes, which I love doing because it was like making costumes. So it's important to understand that basically in life, but certainly in show business, that these jobs come and go, and you need to always have a prudent reserve, save for the rainy day. And that was really that's some West Virginia upbringing right there. You learn that.
How did you land Pete and Pete by chance?
My friend Catherine Diekman was the director of that show, and she was I believe the main person responsible for getting so many cool people a
Yeah,
guest slot.
Kate Pearson, Iggy Pop, Debbie Harry.
Yes, yes, and she was great fun to work with. I'm still in touch with her. So important for me to maintain. I like to maintain friendships with these people who I've known for so long, who are the ones worth maintaining a friendship with.
The show's a little wacky. Was it really wacky behind the scenes?
Everyone's very professional. So it was like period of time where people could get away with, and plus I think with a kids show, you could get away with a little more wackiness, but it was very, very professional. It wasn't like the Nickelodeon we're hearing about lately.
Oh no.
You know what? It was very wholesome. All the goofy things were a wholesome goofiness, at least from my experience, quote
Harvey
unquote.
Weinstein recently had his rape conviction overturned. How problematic is this for up and coming female actors in the movie industry?
I think it's a problem for women everywhere. That's about all I can say on that.
How can Hollywood be more proactive about helping young starlets avoid those types of situations?
The culture has changed quite a bit. So women have more agency and they have more of opportunities for communicating with each other and publicly, should they so choose. I think young women are less naive about how the world operates, how exploitation operates, how grooming operates. I think just to keep the communication about this stuff, try not to, you don't want to ruin people's childhood, but you want there to be protections in place. And I think awareness is a very good protection. But I don't think any of this stuff is ultimately going to completely stop because it's part of the nature of the business and capitalism and the exploitive dynamics that occur with certain types of individuals who get into these environments.
Have you had any kind of Harvey Weinstein situations with you before?
Not quite like that. Not like that. It was, uh, that's a much bigger conversation to have. I think because I got into I was 26 when I did The Hunger or somewhere around there. I was 30 before I did Making Mr. Right. I mean, I did movies, but I wasn't in the mill. I have a friend who was a model. She was younger, a couple of years younger than me, but she got into modeling basically, as a teenager in the late 70s into the 80s. And oh my God, the stories that she has are insane. And I think because I had rejected the dominant culture, the mainstream world to a certain degree, I wasn't as exposed to it, but I was exposed to abuses because that's the nature of being a young woman in New York City or anywhere in the 70s and 80s, because nobody was really, misogyny and misbehavior was pretty much considered normal.
How did you land Desperately Seeking Susan?
Susan Seidelman knew me from the scene, the downtown scene and performances, and she was putting people from the scene into the movie in little cameo parts. And I initially auditioned for the part of Madonna's best friend that Anna Thompson got, and Susan sent me some pictures of me and Madonna uh, auditioning together, but the videotape had disintegrated, but she was able to grab some green shots. And I'm just waiting for the right place, the time to post those, but I don't know when that will be. But I didn't get that. But then they said, "What do you want to be the cigarette girl?" I said, "Yeah, I'd love to." And I said, "Can I?" Was talk to this costume designer, Santo LaCosta, who was a premier designer, worked on Broadway a lot and Woody Allen movies. So it was very exciting to work with him, and he was great. And I said, I want a Louise Brooks Bob wig. And he said, yeah. And he said, and I found this old majorette uniform I thought could be the top. And I was like, and you could, and he was all for showing off my legs, which I'm happy to say I inherited from my maternal grandmother who had good, nice legs. So I'm like, yeah, this is all great, and Susan Settleman let me write my own dialogue, and a lot of that got cut. So mostly it's just, oh, hi, Susan, when Madonna comes in, hi, Susan. We all thought you were dead. No, just in New Jersey. So I gave her that. She got the punchline, but I set her up. And that was a line, actually, my friend John Reed, who I was really good friends with at the time, and he also died of AIDS. He recommended that line to me because I guess he cribbed it from Eugene O'Neill. So there you go. But the cigarettes, Tofuti, that was mine, and the different lengths of the cigarettes and stuff. And it was nice that Susan let that stuff stay in there.
Did you know Madonna beforehand?
A little bit, a little bit, through Martin Burgoyne, I was very close to, and he was very close to her. I knew her a little bit just from around the East Village and certain clubs and stuff. But got to know her a little bit better doing the movie. But then, her star was on the rise, and boom, she was pretty much out of my orbit after that movie came out.
You said in a podcast that you were fat shamed on the set of Making Mr. Right.
I don't think I ever used the word fat shamed because I don't
Nope.
think I was ever
Well,
fat, but maybe I did. I
someone
was
comment
told
on your weight.
because the costumes were getting tight on me because I was eating. So I was told maybe don't just stay away from the craft service, or I didn't really understand how to diet, or I didn't have the actress body thing yet. Awareness of oh, you should get up at 4 a.m. and work out for 2 hours before you get on the set. It was none of that, but there are times when I think I got a little bloated here and there, but I wouldn't make too much out of that.
Did lots of people in the acting world have eating disorders because of all that?
I don't know that many people in the acting world. I know a few actresses who everybody's obsessed with, when you're younger, you gotta look sexy, I guess.
What was it like working with John Malkovich and the late Glenn Headley on Making Mr. Right?
Glenn Headley?
Yeah.
Oh, they were okay. I mean, I don't know what was going on with them at the time. Maybe they were having their difficulties, but they're I've said this before, they were real theater snobs. Sometimes I don't know. Next question.
In 1998, you got to play Dee O'Hara on the HBO miniseries From the Earth to the Moon. O'Hara was the first aerospace nurse to NASA's first astronauts. Did you ever get to meet the real life Dee O'Hara?
No, I didn't, but I met astronaut Dave Scott, who was a technical advisor on the series, and he was fantastic. And him and his wife, I met both of them, and he would tell me he apparently whispered in the ear of the director at one point, Dee would never have worn that much makeup. But they put a lot of makeup on me because they were doing something that looked like home movies, and there was a lot of light flooded on my face. So they needed to put a lot on it so my features would show up. That was a thrill. I loved doing that. They flew me to Florida, where they shot near Cape Canaveral, and meeting a real astronaut. I wrote a song about that called I Met an Astronaut that is on Pretty Songs and Ugly Stories. And it was a complete thrill. And Mark Harmon, who played Wally Schirra, he was so much fun. The other guys who played the astronauts were super fun guys. We had a blast. So these things are great experiences. I'm very blessed that I've had these experiences. Even if it's just a small part, it was a great opportunity.
Having worked with Madonna and Mariah Carey in Desperately Seeking Susan and Glitter, in your opinion, can either of these singer-songstresses act?
I don't know.
I liked
touch
Mariah and Precious. I have to say that. I saw Glitter. It wasn't as bad as people say, but I mean, I really thought she did a standout job in Precious. I will say that.
You know what? I didn't see that, and I liked Mariah, and I have some great Polaroids of us together. It's not who cares what I think? I mean, I don't care. If they capture them on camera doing what needs to be done to service the story and it works, it works. That's movie making. You can grab somebody off the street who has could they stand up and act against Meryl Streep on Broadway in a very serious play full of a lot of dialogue? Maybe not, but can you put a camera on them in this circumstance and light it this way and edit it this way, and then it's perfect for the story? Then fine.
Ann Magnuson has lived a life that many West Virginians only dream of. Just check out her listing on Internet Movie Database. She's got to record music on her terms, act in Hollywood blockbusters, and rub elbows with the who's who of the art world. Like many former West Virginia residents, Ann longs to return to the Mountain State and be something other than a frequent visitor. Hopefully someday her wish will come true. I want to thank my special guest, Ann Magnuson, for dishing her life as a young West Virginian and as an actor and songstress in the entertainment industry. Ghost Cat is available to download and stream on Bandcamp, iTunes, Spotify, and YouTube. For Mothman and the Bible Belt podcast outlet updates, guest bios, episode breakdowns, and links to social media, please visit www.mothmanandthebiblebelt.com. Thanks for listening.